Living very happily in a somewhat large house in Somerset with lots of grounds, and we were very nicely located as far as the family were concerned, because my daughter was studying for a PhD, engineering PhD in Plymouth, and my son was here in Stockbridge. But my wife felt that with advancing age we really ought to get a property which was more commensurate with our age, and to move whilst we had the ability to do so. So after much searching and much heart and soul searching, we eventually arrived here in Wherwell, and we saw the village, and there was nothing at the time. And then we received a telephone call saying a property was here for sale, and we moved up that day, saw the property, and decided to buy it. As easy as that, really. And it was a property which really met most of our requirements, but very much smaller than that which we'd left. Well, as a newcomer, I've only been here, as I said, only for just over 6 years. But during that time, I've become very fond of the village. I find it to be a quintessentially English village with a lot of history and a lot of great and much rural charm. It's set in beautiful countryside around here, and the icing on the cake is, of course, that the people here are very friendly and very welcoming, and we've enjoyed our time here enormously. Yes, I think it's true that there are a preponderance of people like me, really, old and retired and settled here. And I think there is a danger that it could end up as something caught in aspect, as a time warp, which would just be a dormitory area for old retired couples or people that are using it as a weekend village. I think that should be avoided at all costs. I mean, that we are making at the moment a village design statement, and that I hope will bring forth for the village the way ahead for the future. The real need in the village is well, first of all, we must say that the problem here is that there's a large conservation area, there's a lot of SSSIs, and it is really surrounded by an environmentally sensitive area, and it's part of the Harewood Forest Heritage Area. So the type of development here would be very restricted. But what we do really need is some form of housing or accommodation which young people can afford, and the people that are born and brought up here can actually live and stay here, because it isn't necessary for them to have the actual business here in the village, because if you think of it, we're 10 minutes from Andover, we're half an hour from Salisbury, about 40 minutes from Winchester and 40 minutes from Southampton. But if they had the ability to live here in reasonably priced property, then in my view that's one of the things that is really missing here. Now, where they would develop that, I don't know, but certainly ought to be looked at. I think some kind of solution should be made to that problem. There are modern buildings and modern buildings. I mean, that sounds a truism, I know, but I mean, you can get modern buildings built which at the same time have a sympathy with the older surroundings. And there's no doubt that has been achieved in certain areas. I mean, I've seen places where they've had some very nice new buildings put up, which are, although they're not in the classical old style, but they very sympathetically mould into the natural surroundings. And that is possible. I've seen it actually done in Bristol. I've seen it done in other parts of the country in which I've lived. So they don't stand out like a sore thumb. And that can easily be done if we're not careful, but you can actually produce that kind of construction. There's no doubt about it. Well, it depends what you mean by the new technologies. I mean, I have seen buildings in other towns and in other villages put up using all the modern materials and so on, and you can still make the new buildings sympathetically compatible with the old. There's no question that it can be done. You obviously can't have within, for instance, a street like this, some gorgeous modern building which would look fine in Manhattan, because that would stand out like a sore thumb and would really be disastrous. But you can put up very good buildings with modern materials which would fit in and be sympathetic to the normal and old surroundings. It's quite possible to do it. I've seen it done. You can't put back the clock. You've got to accept that things move on, and there's no doubt that as long as it's done within a certain style, which would be acceptable to the listed building people and the environment and the planning authorities, then I think it could go ahead. Fine. Yeah.